we have a look at the book, please?
Yeah, absolutely. There it is in all of its glory.
Oh, wonderful, great. The Five Foundations of Contentment. Let's see the back, 'cause I never get to see the back. I have a digital copy. Oh,
Yeah, you
what?
don't get to see the back.
Ah, what does the quote say? What does the quote say?
It says, "You'll never change your life until you change something you do daily. The secret of success is found in your daily routine." By John C. Maxwell. Let me see if I
Wow,
can get it on camera.
wow.
There's some glare.
Yeah, it's legible.
Okay,
Thank you for sharing, John.
you're
And
welcome.
I'll definitely also send you a link to this live stream in your messenger. You can feel free to share it if you want. And again, this book is actually one that I purchased myself. And there's a lot of topics that I feel relate to our generation as millennials. Because, I mean, in my opinion, you can let me know if, to what extent you might agree or disagree, but I feel that there's so many unique things happening when we as millennials are growing up. First of all, the pandemic, and then when we were barely entering college, I believe it was the 2008 recession.
Hmm.
Very unique things are happening nowadays, especially with with the development of technology, the way that business is done, the way that entertainment is done, the way that all sorts of things have been digitized nowadays. So I feel that we live in very unique times, and because of that, even though the human condition is quite universal, there are a few things that are very unique to us, especially when we consider the concept of finances, when we consider the concept of school debt, right? College debt, when we consider the fact that we need to find purpose in our lives. And a lot of us, we don't really have that direction. And a lot of us feel a little bit lost. And I know that in your personal experience as an immigrant and as a person reaching success here in the United States, it was not easy. I believe you described how you worked multiple jobs. You described how the school experience was very particularly challenging. And in spite of that, you are still grateful for having the opportunity to overcome those challenges and sharing the lessons that you learned. So, within that context, could you tell us what are the five foundations that you speak about in terms of finding contentment? What was the importance that you found in reaching those conclusions through the struggles in your life? And what are some of the things that you would like the audience to know that could benefit us as millennials, but not only millennials, because a lot of these lessons are very universal as well. So, basically, to begin with, what is your opinion in terms of our unique challenges as millennials and how they relate to the content of your book?
Yeah, really great question. So my parents are the ones who are Grimmins. I was fortunate enough to be born here in the U.S., but yeah, you're correct. I was first generation college, so I didn't really have anyone in my family to talk to about the college experience. In terms of the five foundations, I started writing them. Well, okay, to let's rewind. When I graduated or not high school, when I graduated college, um, I there was I got the job that you're supposed to get out of college, right? Excellent benefits, great company. The company I worked for at the time was a Fortune 500 company. Excellent benefits, great pay, had everything. But I realized that I wasn't happy, and on top of that, I was buried in debt. I was buried in student loan debt and some other debt. And so after working there for for a few months, I decided that it wasn't the path that I wanted to take. I realized that I asked myself, is this where I see myself, working for the rest of my life, or is this the type of lifestyle that I want to live for the rest of my life? And that's a kind of a weird question to ask when you're 27 years old, because that's how I was at the time. And the answer was no. So I decided to leave and just do a lot of soul searching. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and that's kind of the path that I decided to take. Full time. And when I was struggling, I felt like I had no purpose in life. I had no direction, and just one day I realized that there's five things in life that you really need in order to feel like you have direction in your life, and that's your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health. So like spiritual in terms of like your burdens. For me, minimalism was really a huge stepping stone for my spiritual health. I don't necessarily bring religion into it. So, and then the fourth one was let's see, physical, mental, relational, spiritual, and financial. So those five things, I knew I had to focus on those five things in order to feel a sense of contentment because, uh, there's a lot going on in life, especially nowadays with social media. Everyone's just trying to chase that dopamine hit, and they think that that dopamine hit they get, the validation, the sense of validation, that comes externally. They think that's happiness when it's really not. I mean, I guess it can be because happiness, just like anger and sadness, is an emotion. But in terms of if you really want to be truly happy, you have to be content, and that's just to be grateful for what you have. And for me, I realized that when I discovered minimalism, I was extremely grateful for what I had. I got rid of things that I didn't need. I kept the few things that I did need, and that just helped me align my focus with my life goals, and it just helped me find my purpose and all that. It gave me a clear mind. It gave me space. It gave me room to figure out what it is that I want to do in life. Whereas I don't think I would have been able to do that with a full time job and all these crazy hectic things going on in my life.
Right. And I did mistakenly believe this whole time that you were an immigrant because there's something called the immigrant work ethic,
Hmm.
which I believe applies to not only immigrants, but probably the children of immigrants too. Uh,
Absolutely.
the concept of working very hard. And if I may share, at one point we had a conversation in which we discussed how you were working very, very hard to get out of student loan debt, I believe. And when
Hmm.
you were working, you know, not only very long hours, but multiple jobs, it started affecting your sense of time to the point where you probably forgot what day or time it was. And that's how hardworking you were. And then at one point, you decided that instead of working for someone else, you became an entrepreneur and decided to follow your own path in that regard. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is something that a lot of people might be considering. It might be a wise decision, of course, maybe for very select few that do decide to go ahead and try that. Do you have any thoughts to share when it comes to either working different jobs, starting your own business, and learning to manage your finances? Because the concept of minimalism, I think, not only is it something that clarifies the mind, declutters your life, gives you more focus, but it may be an essential ingredient to saving money and to getting out of debt. But especially once you get out of debt, to save that money, to have some sort of safety, safety cushion, savings as a backup for whatever life throws at us. Because no matter what happens, life will always happen, right? And I know that I'm giving you very big questions that probably take hours to answer, but I'm pretty sure that you might have a few thoughts that we could share in very good you know um, very good, well worded thought segments.
Yeah, that's a really good question. To answer your question, long story short, I would say that it all comes down to your why. Whatever it is that you're doing, you have to think about your why, and That's the reason why I placed it as a second chapter in my book. Whether you're trying to get out of debt, you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to, you know, become a musician, or whatever it is that you're trying to do, it has no boundaries. You have to know your why, because when the going gets tough, and it's not if, but it will get tough. I'm sure you and I both can attest to that. When the going gets tough, you have to remind yourself of your why. when I was going through that debt journey, that debt payoff journey, it was a 3 year plan, or it took me about 3 years to get out. So I was grinding it out, and there were times where like, you know what, I paid off enough debt, I can pay it out, the rest of it off in like 5 or 6 years very slowly. But I just kept reminding myself of my why, and my why was to no longer be in debt. I wanted to be able to work as much as I want or as little as I want without having that debt bearing down over me without breaking my neck. And that's one of the things about being an entrepreneur. You can't have all that debt. Sending you reminders and emails and phone calls about how they need to be paid, and try to become an entrepreneur at the same time. Uh, it's really difficult. I don't want to say it's impossible unless you don't want to pay it off at all, and you just let go collections. Um, but yeah, I would just say you got to figure out your why, because when things get challenging, when time comes that you want to quit or you want to do something else, you remind yourself of it. As long as it's a very strong and it's a very deep rooted and a passionate why, then you're gonna keep going.
Right. That's exactly it. Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me, John? I don't know if my audio is working well right
It
now.
it cut out for a bit, but I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Yeah, sometimes technical issues may be occurring, but I think one of the most important things that you said is you got to know your why. Because when I was back in high school in the wrestling team, my wrestling coach would always say, you know, if you, the only thing worse than a bad goal is having no goal at all.
Hmm.
And that stuck with me. And so I think it's very important for all of us to have purpose, to have goals to shoot for. If anything, just so that they could keep us moving along, just so that they could propel us to make progress. Because without goals, then we're like a boat without a sail. And who knows where it might end up. So we need to have purpose and we need to have goals. That's definitely for sure. And I also wanted to discuss a little bit about a topic that I remember reading in your book, which is essentially that we need to find a certain work life balance, right? Because work might be stressing us out at times, and it might actually um, be getting in the way of our enjoyment of life. So, in that regard, how do we know, in your opinion, how do we know how to balance, the fact that we need to develop strong grit, a strong work ethic in order to get stuff done, in order to be reaching a certain level of success? But at the same time, how do we know to set limits so that the stress does not become overwhelming and we can have, work that is more rewarding and less overwhelming? What is the balance between a strong work ethic, but at the same time knowing when it's time to search for a different job? And I believe we also talked about this in the past about the topic of the Great Resignation. So there might be a few thoughts in regards to that maybe you would like to share, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Really good question. It's funny because it depends on what it is that that you're referring to. If you're referring to a job, then you don't necessarily have to be passionate about. Like, it would be nice, but a job isn't necessarily there for you to feel like you're changing the world. It's there to pay your bills. I mean, it'll be awesome to work a job that you're also happen to be changing the world and making a difference in life. But if you're not, then that's okay, because you can do it outside of work. When it comes to just a regular job, it's there to pay your bills. So later on, outside of work, in your spare time, you can do what it is that you want to do. And in terms of the Great Resignation, I think a lot of people, after the pandemic, they realized that they didn't have the best work-life balance, or they maybe their priorities changed. Maybe before the pandemic, they saw themselves as like a really successful lawyer, or they saw themselves as a certain person. And once the pandemic hit, they're like, I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to have a different career path, or I see myself doing something different than what it is now. And I think that's originally how it got started. And the problem is that while the movement is really good, I think a lot of people are just quitting their job just for the sake of quitting their job, and I think that's where it gets dangerous because we all have to support ourselves financially, whether we like it or not. Whether we have to work jobs that we may or may not like. Um, you know, maybe you get like a more basic job, like in the service industry. I know a lot of people who are leaving six-figure jobs to go like do DoorDash or deliver pizza, something where they kind of have their own time, in the car, listening to music and all that stuff. And they're happier than that than making six figures, and props to them. Um, but yeah, I just don't want to see people just leaving a job for the sake of it, just because they think that everyone else is doing it. If you have a really good job and you enjoy it, keep it. Don't quit. But yeah, I mean that's kind of what I had on that topic.
Thank you very much for that very good answer. I'm going to read a quote from your book. It says here that genuine friendships are rare and they're tough to come by. If you're fortunate enough to have friends who would be by your side if you were to lose everything today, make sure to cherish and enjoy those relationships. And I think what's interesting about this excerpt is that we live in a time of quarantine. We live in a time of pandemic in which socializing, especially in large groups, is frowned upon. Not only that, but I believe that studies show that people are feeling lonelier than ever before. And people feel that
Hmm.
they have less close friends than ever before. To some degree, social media is being blamed. That's where a lot of people are pointing the finger at. And I really don't know what the reason may or may not be, but the fact is that there is a type of loneliness epidemic. So when it comes to relationships, whether it be friendships or otherwise, what are your thoughts on that? Um, I guess I'll leave it a little bit open ended.
Yeah, it's another very good question. The pandemic has definitely brought a lot of challenges in regards to mental health. For me, I believe you're in your mid to late 20s, and I'm in my early 30s, and we both have, we both grew up socializing with with people. Maybe it included like a picnic or playing sports or some type of in-person interaction. But there's a lot of kids like whether they're in the they're 8 years old, 9 years old, or maybe teenagers or early teens, young adults that necessarily didn't grow up on that same face-to-face interaction. So I don't think you can say, hey, it's social media's fault. I think the pandemic put everyone in a position where they had to find find ways to socialize without without being face to face. And for a lot of people, social media and all the different mediums they can communicate with people is godsend for them, because after all we are humans and humans are social creatures. Honestly, my personal opinion is that I think it's okay to go out and socialize with people, um, face to face, as long as the most important thing is to be outdoors and socially distanced. As long as you keep a good distance, away from each other, it's okay to socialize. But the thing that I've noticed is that more and more people, I don't know if it's that they don't want to socialize, or I think they're a lot more comfortable now, or they've grown more comfortable with socializing online, because it's so much easier to to text someone or do a video chat rather than get in your car and drive to a destination like a restaurant or a park, to to meet face to face with someone. And I personally, me, I prefer in person, face to face communication. And I've noticed that it's got a lot harder to find people who want that. And now we're both in LA County, so now restaurants, actually I don't know if restaurants are included, but bars and all other venues are going to be required to for customers to show a proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. And I think that just adds another layer, another challenge for people to be able to get together. And I think it's unfortunate because it's basically coming down to where people who don't want to get vaccinated are they're they might feel forced to get vaccinated. So yeah, this pandemic just add another threw a wrench into the whole thing.
I think you brought up a very many important points. One of them that really stood up to me is the fact that a lot of we have a new generation, probably Generation Z or anything
Mm.
else, which is growing up with less social skills than the millennials did, than our generation did, and well, for example, I myself consider myself an introvert, and I consider myself as a person whose social skills are not as strong as your average person. But with that already said, imagine growing up in an environment where interacting with people face to face is even harder than ever before. So I really like that you mentioned that interacting with people in person is still a possibility as long as you do it safely, right? So there's still gatherings and whatnot that could be done responsibly. And in fact, even here in California, a place that is considered to be the strictest, indoor dining is still allowed, right? We're still allowed to, go certain places and do certain things. So socializing is still a possibility. And I think it's very important, even if it's not, let's say you're not used to socializing too much, you don't have to do it excessively to the point that you're
Mhm.
exhausted, but at least a little bit might be nice. It might feel good to socialize a little bit here and there.
It's really good for you.
Exactly. And I would say it's essential. I would say it's extremely important because we are indeed human beings. I would like to read another excerpt of your book. It says here, being content doesn't mean you're complacent. It means that you're grateful for what you have in your life, but still willing to pursue your goals and your dreams. So, the reason why I think this is very important is because when you're not grateful, when you don't have gratitude, it's very hard to have a sense of contentment or happiness, in my opinion. So, I think gratitude is extremely important. So I like how you tie that into, the concept of, in slang we say being hungry, right? For more, being ambitious, you know, but still being grateful. Because when you're pursuing contentment, that doesn't mean that you divorce yourself from the drive that is propelling you to reach new heights. So, again, in the context of this quote that you wrote, what are your thoughts on that type of balance?
Yeah, that's a really good point. The reason why I put that in the book because for me, I've always felt like I had to come from a place of lack in order to have ambition. So, like for example, like I thought I would have to not have money in order to want more money, and that really wasn't the case. It was actually tough because when I started practicing contentment and gratitude, I'm like, hey, I'm really thankful for what I have, and in a sense, it didn't feel like I needed more stuff, and that kind of got me concerned because I thought that. Even though I was content, I thought that I didn't have that was kind of killing my drive and my ambition to want more. But the more and more I thought about it, I was actually happy for what I had, but also at the same time, I still wanted to strive for my goals. So I know it's kind of complicated because when you think first up, it feels like you don't want anything else. It feels like you kind of have everything that you need and like that's it, show's over. But the more I thought about it, it just gave me an opportunity and allowed me to be thankful for what I had, but also at the same time it gave me kind of like a pathway or a clear mind to kind of like a runway to be able to pursue what it is that I wanted to pursue.
Right. Right. That is a very good answer. Thank you so much.
I'm
There's a
glad you liked it.
yeah, there's actually that balance is sometimes very tricky, isn't it? Because people could really be pushing themselves but be miserable as they push themselves to reach their goal. You don't need to be miserable when you're trying to reach your goals. In fact, the more fun you have, the better. Because the more fun you have while you're trying to reach those goals, the more consistent you are with it. The more you look
Exactly.
forward to doing the activity. Like, for example, you and I are starting the notion of working out more, right? In order to get in shape and get stronger and everything else. If we're completely miserable in our workouts and just hate it and just really dread it, how often are they going to happen? But
Not very much.
but if you have a blast when you're working out, if it's kind of fun and you look forward to it, might happen a little more often, right? Then you get more
Definitely.
results. So yeah, I think the concept of having fun is very, very important. And I found here another quote that I think is extremely essential. It says here, however, being content takes a lot more work because first and foremost, you have to think differently than the way society and marketing has trained you to think. There's a few things that I want to extrapolate from this quote. One, the concept of thinking differently. I believe Steve Jobs had a quote. He had a saying, think differently. Those two words were just enough to convey his message. And look at how successful he was. But it all originated from the concept of thinking differently, which is very often looked down upon, but sometimes it's the missing ingredient in innovation and revolutions and progress, in my opinion. We have to think differently. And then you also mentioned we have to think differently than the way society and marketing has trained us to think. We do not realize very often how much of an influence marketing has in our outlook on life. Sometimes very big corporations, sometimes very big governments push one idea or the other, and before we know it, all of us are speaking with the same language, with the same catchphrases, with the same trends. And so we are influenced and bombarded by marketing all the time, right? Branding, social media. Um, when we go and for a drive, we see billboards. So everywhere we are influenced one way or the other. But the concept of thinking differently, that gives us a little bit of independence, independent thought. The ability, it gives us more strength to control our own lives. So when you wrote this quote, what to what level was thinking differently fundamental in your journey? And what message would you like to share in terms of the notion of thinking differently than the way society and marketing has conditioned and trained us to think?
Yeah, that's another excellent point that you brought up. For me, I've always believed that if I don't think differently, if I think the same way that everyone else does, then I'm going to get a similar result that they are, and that doesn't necessarily serve me. If I want something that's going to serve me, I have to think about what it is that the other people aren't doing. That's just not. It's just not something that I set out myself to do. I didn't tell myself one day, hey, I'm going to go think differently. It's just something that I guess like it's an innate ability where I've never really paid attention to what everyone else is doing. I kind of want to create my own path and go that route. But yeah, if you want to do something that hasn't been done before, then you have to think outside the box. I was watching a podcast the other day, and they were talking about Steve Jobs, which is what you were mentioning earlier. I also think differently was actually a motto or a slogan that Apple used for a while in their marketing campaigns. But back to the podcast, the one I was listening to, they were saying that Steve Jobs, he thought not only did he think outside the box, but he also didn't know what the box was like. He never paid attention to it, and I think that's the important thing nowadays. You have to have critical thinking skills. You have to figure out what it is that you want. In order to do that, you have to um, you really have to pay attention to what it is that you what difference you want to see in the world, what changes that you want to make, and a lot of times it requires to do things differently than you're trained to. For example, we live in the U.S. It's a very capitalistic state, where capitalism is huge. So as a result, we live in a very consumer-based society, and like you said, as at a young age, we're throwing all type of ads and training us that oh, you need the latest iPhone or you need the latest computer, to be accepted along with the other members of society. And that's really not the case. Figure out what it is that you want to do, and go your own route. Whatever people criticize you, shaming you for going your own route, then that's good because that means that you're doing the right thing.
Thank you very much for that answer. one of the very interesting things that you mentioned is the fact that if we think like everyone else, we're going to get the same results. Do we really want to end up like the majority of people or not? In my opinion, I think probably not. Again, my wrestling coach from back in high school, he said something very similar. He said, if you do today what others will not do, you'll do tomorrow what others cannot.
I like it.
And I think that goes into the next quote from the book, which says, your daily efforts may not seem like much, but they do add up over time, similar to compound interest. Now, if our daily efforts are, for example, in the category of reading books and instead of spending too much time on social media, in the concept of maybe learning a new skill instead of watching Netflix all the time. In other words, doing what other people will not do, doing the things that are difficult, but doing it at a pace that is easy for us to follow, in segments that are easy for us to be able to do. Sort of making hard things easy, right? Because if we do them daily, even if it's for a short amount of time, the good habits that we're trying to build, before we know it, we're going to look back and see all the progress we made, right? Like you said, it's going to be like compound interest. And to many people in our generation who are unfortunately financially illiterate, can you explain to us the concept of basically multiplying the fruits of our labor, compound interest as a result of daily efforts, and maybe one example from your life?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are waking up when it comes to their finances. I've been looking on YouTube, and there's a ton of YouTubers that are specializing in personal finance. So I think a lot of people are watching. They're starting to wake up, which is a good sign. For me, I guess one of the examples that I could use is my book. When I was writing my book, um, at the beginning, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna have one really good night where I just, write for 4 or 5 hours, and everything's gonna come out. And with this book, it didn't work out that way. It did with the first book, but not this one. So what I did was I set like 2 3 hours each night, and I would just write whatever came to mind. And then over time, I started, I, I had a lot of texts, and I started, you know, moving them in different chapters. Started editing, and but yeah, I think the problem is that a lot of people have goals and they don't really know how to work towards them. They think that there's going to be this perfect time to work on their goals, and it's really not. It's just locate or allocating a little bit of time, from your day to day basis, and just work on it. Spend half an hour, whatever it is that you can invest in it, and over time you'll accomplish that goal.
Very good, John. Um, that is something that a lot of us overlook. We feel like we need to get things done in one chunk, in one bite. That's sometimes impossible. You can't get to Rome with just one step. You got to take multiple steps throughout the spanning of our lives. And there's a very interesting idea that I think comes from Japanese culture is that they really mistrust the concept of becoming successful from one day to another because they value the concept of time tied in with effort. So the longer somebody has been doing, let's say, a profession or a craft or something, the more recognition they have because they've been doing it for a very long time and putting so much effort for a very long time, developing themselves for a very long time. So that's where the value comes from. If somebody magically, from one day to another, there's the concept of easy come, easy go. We sort of really do need to put in our daily efforts, and but the good news is that they might actually be less intimidating than we think. If we just do a little bit each day, before we know it, the accumulation of our efforts is going to be very big. Like you, when you were writing your book, like every night, a little bit, the next day, a little bit, and before you know it, you had a book. How many
Yep, it
people
all
can
adds
say they
up.
wrote a book? Not a lot of people. Yes, and I would like to share another quote. I think this will be one the final one, but man. If I had it my way, we'd be up here all night, but this book has 989 pages. And there's like so many quotes that I would like to go to, but we're gonna moderate ourselves because we have to we have to moderate ourselves. Anyway,
Maybe we could do part two, part three.
it would be a pleasure. So here it says, well, we have been trained to think like one another, which can be referred to as herd mentality. I'm paraphrasing. And it says here, you're unique and bring something different than everyone else in the world. Start acting and thinking like it. I believe that a lot of us subconsciously have low self esteem. We probably think, what makes me special? Who am I? The heck? I'm just gonna watch Netflix or whatever. By the way, Netflix, I mentioned you twice, so I believe I need to be sponsored now for promoting you. I'm just kidding. And so, whoever's watching this, you really are unique, as cheesy as it sounds. And you really do bring something different than everyone else in the world. That is completely true because your experiences are not the same as mine, they're not the same as John's. So you have some skills, experiences, and stories that we don't, which makes you special, which makes you unique, and which makes you valuable. And John here in the book is saying start acting and thinking like it. So, John, at what point or how did that epiphany look like to you when you decided to start acting and thinking as though you're unique and different in order to set yourself away from herd mentality?
Man, you're bringing heat tonight with all these questions. That's another really good question. Um, for me, I never thought told myself like, hey, I'm better than everyone else. It just when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I knew that I had or I was really passionate about writing, and with my first book, I just decided to write it. And for me, writing, being an author, it's not something I always dreamed of as a kid. It just kind of happened. But for me, I realized that when I was writing stuff and getting the message out there about the thoughts that I had, for me, that was just my way of kind of getting away from the herd mentality of believing that everything that society told me. I had my own unique thoughts, and I wanted to share it with people. And what better way to do that than write a few books, right?
Absolutely, and that brings me to a few concluding thoughts. One of those is that the book was very much worth the read from my experience. You're going to find a lot of things that are going to be insightful. And you're going to find a lot of things that you've probably thought about yourself but never really reflected upon deeply enough. So the book is going to invite you to continue that reflection. And you may also find things that you might think differently about than the author. I believe in my first live stream, John and I went into a discussion as to the definition of contentment, the definition of happiness, but guess what? Philosophers to this day cannot even agree amongst themselves, even throughout the century, about what those words really mean. That's why they always start with, what is happiness? What is contentment? So we're never
But
going
it's
to.
healthy.
Exactly. It's a healthy discussion. It's healthy to disagree sometimes. What I'm trying to say is that this book, which John, could you remind us of the price? I believe the last time I checked it was $10. It had a special discount, right? If I'm not mistaken, in Amazon. But
Well, yeah. So what I do is on Amazon, it's called MSRP. You just kind of put that in, and Amazon plays around with it because sometimes they run specials or they run sales. I think the Kindle right now is $9.99 and the paperback is $14.99.
okay, great. And maybe we could have a link in the description to this video that John could share so that people could find that book either digitally or order the physical copy. Can we see it one more time? Can we see the physical copy of your
Oh
book one
yeah.
more time? See, check it out. If you have the physical copy, you can draw like horns on John. You see how the background's red? You can make him look
Only
like
if
the
you hate
devil.
the book. If you like it, don't do it.
Right. You could draw glasses on him because he's missing glasses. Not like me, I came prepared. Anyways, but yeah, On the serious note, it's important to highlight, to underline, to write notes in the margin whenever you read anything. What I did with my digital copy of the book, Amazon, the web version of the Amazon Kindle allows me to write notes. So I wrote
Hmm.
some notes. It allows me to highlight. That's the way that I like to read. It's called active reading. So I invite people to actively read John's book because it's something that you're going to extract a lot of meaning from, a lot of messages, a lot of information from. And John, in your book, you said, I speak in generalities, and I believe that's important in order to appeal to the unique lives of us readers because you go into very, very different topics such as relational health, financial health, and what else? Spiritual health. And could you help me with the remaining foundations?
Physical, mental, relational, spiritual, and financial.
Right. So those are the five essential pillars when it comes to reaching contentment. And you go into depth, giving examples from your own life as to your thoughts about those very crucial things that we as human beings need to balance in our own specific lives. And this is going to lead me to my next point, which is here we are in the local lantern, which is a Facebook page and a YouTube channel that I and a friend decided to create in order to promote the consumption of media created by local creators. And John, maybe you could share your opinion about this, but I think it is extremely important for us as individuals. I'm using the royal us to really appreciate and value locally created content because if we don't, then the monopoly will be in the big corporations. The monopoly will be in basically the the offices of CEOs and other people who are trying to influence us one way or the other. But if we, as local musicians, writers, poets, arts and crafts specialists, artists, we as local creators, if we create some sort of bohemian, ground up appreciation for our own art, we are able to feed off each other, develop from each other, and create from our own strengths and influences in order to bring out the best in us. That's one thing that I was thinking about when I was reading John's book. It's like I really appreciate the fact that I'm reading something from a local creator because, as you can see here, I have access to the writer of the book that I'm reading, and I'm able to ask the writer specific questions about the book. When's the last time that the average person was able to do that with a big shot, J.K. Rowling or King, or a
Stephen
lot
King.
Stephen King, um, and etc. 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 R.L. Stein. When's the last time you were able to be, you know, speaking directly to these guys? If we support ourselves, if we support our local writers, if we support our local musicians, our local artists, then we can build a community. Like we were talking about earlier, there's a sense of being disconnected from each other, but we could create a connection through appreciation of our own works. So, John, do you have any thoughts on that topic, more or less?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that was the case, a decade or two ago. But now with social media, everyone has a voice. Thankfully for platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, everyone could just kind of create something and share it with the rest of the world. So that's a beautiful thing. I don't know if you have Spectrum, but on their the TV cable service, if you tune into Channel One, sometimes they highlight different writers and painters and murals and all that stuff in LA. I think they do like once or twice a week, so that's really cool. For a big platform like that. But yeah, definitely, it all comes down to sharing with your friends and getting the word out. Social media allows you to do that. So yeah, definitely take advantage of it.
Thank you very much. So, everyone, please like and subscribe to the Local Lantern. Please buy John Mikaelian's book. Please stay tuned for future content. I believe John and I, we're thinking about maybe making a part two or part three because his book is that big. And maybe we could also talk about various topics because there's so many things going on that maybe we could talk about. But in any case, I appreciate everybody who was able to watch this, and until next time, let's see.